Welcome once again to In Touch. Once again, Dr. John Nowicki is with us, Nowicki Chiropractic and Wellness.
Thanks for having me.
And education.
Yeah. So the word of the day today is concussion.
Oh.
If you haven't seen the movie Concussion, you should. And you're thinking, well, I'm not a football player, because it's primarily about the Steelers and their glory day players from the 70s, 80s even, that started having all these terrible issues and falling apart and becoming, drug addicts and criminals and suicides. And they go over the story of the pathologist. Omalu was his name, and he was from Nigeria, and he did an autopsy on Mike Webster from the Steelers. He was the center, and it was kind of the start of the whole concussion issue with the NFL, because what he ended up doing was he ended up out of his own pocket, the pathologist, paying for some advanced testing on the brain of Mike Webster. And what he came back with, and they published it in a peer-reviewed literature journal, was a whole new diagnosis. They called it chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And what that means is repeated trauma to the brain over time. All right, and he estimated that Mike Webster, from playing football in his early days as Pee Wee football all the way up to all the years as a pro player, probably had somewhere around 70,000 hits to his head. Now, not every one of them was a concussion as we typically think of it, where the guy gets up or the gal gets up and is woozy and, can't tell you how many fingers are in front of their eyes. And, back when I was a kid, we'd call him a dinger, get over it, sit him down,
right.
Or they'd send him right back into the huddle, and the guy was cannon fodder for the next play because the other team knew it. They're like, oh, I nailed him. Let's hit him again. Hit him even harder. Well, that's what the Steelers did, and it kind of followed their team. Of course, this happens all over. Well, I'm watching it, and I'm going, holy smokes, that's me. Because I've had 4 major car accidents since I've been up here, and I love snowboarding, but I've caught my heels too many times as a snowboarder. And for those of you that snowboard, that means you get rat-trapped backwards into the ground. I've got post-concussion syndrome. I've got headaches at times, issues that I'm watching these Steelers, and it's like, holy smokes, where am I going to be in 20 years, 15 years? Dave Duerson? He was part of the movie, and he was a rep for the NFL Players Union, and they fought this concussion issue when it showed up. They were like, this research is baloney, and there's no way, and whatnot. Well, he ended up starting having problems, and he shot himself in the chest. And at first, he was like telling other NFL players, well, you're full of it. And then he ends up offing himself. So, terrible things. So, where am I going with this? Here's the deal. You don't treat concussions with drugs. You don't treat them with surgery. Okay? There's a whole slew of things you can do. And the guy that wrote the peer-reviewed synopsis of all the different things you can do to help out with concussions, and it's like a 40-page review that's going to be in a new neurology textbook coming out. He's putting on a seminar at the Rose Bowl, the second to last weekend of July. It's going to be at the press room at the Rose Bowl, and I'm going to go to that. And there's also a high-priced trainer coming from the East Coast that attracts people from all over the world, soccer players and whatnot that have concussions. And I'm going to learn from them basically all these conservative measures that are research proven to help with concussions. Why? Why does a chiropractor, want to do that? Well, here's why. All right. Again, it fits with what we do. It's conservative. We don't prescribe drugs. We choose not to as a profession, and we certainly don't do surgery. There's other people that do that. All right. But I have patients that come in with neck injuries and head trauma from car accidents and slips and falls. Let's go over 2 of them right now. I'm hoping to have both of them as testimonials that we'll be playing at our recordings in August.
Good.
The first one, She's a lady that a few months back when we had our last slippery day of the year, icy, she slipped out in front of Super One parking lot and smacked her head on the frozen asphalt and ice and had all these symptoms, personality changes, lack of energy, inability to concentrate off of one hit. We're not talking 70,000 hits, folks. Okay? This is not just for all-pro football players. This is for the folks that got like one hit and started having problems. Mm-hmm. She's been under care now for about 2 months with this. We put her under a corrective care program, and we're working on her spine. And here's the thing. When you work on the spine and get the joints of the spine moving better, the joints in the spine are heavily innervated with mechanoreceptors. Those are nerve fibers that fire when the joint moves. And that joint movement, energy sent to the brain to tell the brain that it's moving so your brain can sense where you are in space, is really important for brain function. So it helps the brain that's gone through a concussion heal by getting those joints moving better. Okay? That alone has taken away her personality changes that she didn't like. She's got her energy back. She's like the lady I remember from the past, and I knew her in the past before she came in for this. She'd been a previous patient. The other case that just started, 70-some-year-old gentleman riding along on a gravel road, getting close to his house, lives out in the country, and he just got tired and dozed off for a second and ran into a tree at about 20 miles an hour. That was 6-7 weeks ago. And he came in and he says, I'm just hurting all over. And he's holding his head, rubbing his head, and he's just hurting head to toe. Everything's hurting on him. And everything in his life, activities of daily living, his personality. When we got to setting goals, his wife was in the room with us, and she spoke up before he even could when I said, hey, what we want to do is set some targets for what you can expect from what we're going to recommend. Most people don't come in because they're in pain. They come in because the problem they have is negatively impacting their life. So what would you like to see and be able to do better than you are now when we get rid of this problem? And his wife spoke up and said, I want my husband back. She says, he's ornery and grumpy. He never was. He was always bubbly, fun, jolly kind of a guy. That's why they stayed married all these years. Yeah. And the concussion, the force of getting hit by that airbag when he fell asleep, altered the way his brain functioned. He's got a different brain pre and post. All right? While she's saying that, he leans forward, grabs his head, and I thought he was going to start crying. He didn't get angry and say, yeah, shut up or anything like that. He wasn't ornery. He was just crushed that the woman he's married to wants her husband back, and he's not the guy that he was 6 weeks before. So he just started care. We'll give you updates with him, but I'm betting we'll do just as well as we did with the other lady that slipped and fell. But a month from now...
When you get to a point that you have what they term a concussion, then the slightest hit any time later should probably add more problems to you, right?
Yeah, here's a crazy thing.
It doesn't have to be another big slam.
No, here's a crazy thing.
Wow.
It can be repetitive little hits that never quite give you that starry-eyed, glazed look.
Yeah.
Okay? It can be from just, heading the ball in soccer. You go, well, that's not a concussion.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's an impact that puts a shock through. You see, your brain has a consistency of butter. All right?
Yeah.
And imagine this. Imagine your brain as an overripe tomato inside of a jar. Okay? And then you take that jar and you shake it a few times back and forth. All right? What happens to the tomato?
Yeah,
Gets
right.
bruised, right?
Yep.
Gets damaged. The outer lining of it gets damaged and weakened. Okay? And the inside gets beat up too. Now, the first concussion, people oftentimes recover from that and, they feel pretty good. They get their return to play orders or whatever. But it's the following concussions that are the ones that really create the most damage because it breaks down the brain's ability to resist trauma, the first one. So the next one, the brain's already pre-weakened, even if you have no signs of a concussion.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring back the absolute peer-reviewed stuff that says, hey, this is what helps concussions, whether it's nutrition, whether it's exercises, things like that to reestablish normal neural pathways. And I'm going to be using it on myself. All right, I'm 52 years old. I've had a slew of impacts, concussions, and so forth. The latest was, the car accident where I got T-boned that I've mentioned a few times here over at Brighting. I was going north on 141, and a guy blew the stop sign there coming from the west. Spun my car into the corner and over the curb by the animal shelter. Stopped me in like 40 feet, 50 feet after I was hit, from going 57 miles an hour to nothing. Yeah, spinning. Let's see, what did I spin? About 210, 225 degrees, and stopped. So I got a rotational and a forward impact injury. And then when the airbag went off, I got smacked from the side of the head as well. So my brain was just in a frickin' mix master for a brief second.
Wow.
And that's probably one of the biggest ones I've had. But, man, I remember back out skiing at Indian Head, and a guy clipped behind my board. Actually, he skied in front of me, and I clipped the back of his skis. So he kept going, but my snowboard caught heels at high speed. And I remember a buddy of mine riding up the chairlift. He said, "Hey, Nowicki, that was awesome looking. You went up after you hit, and in midair you kind of vibrated like a 2x4. I'm like, yeah, imagine what my brain was doing while I was shaking like a 2x4 in midair. He thought it was funny. I didn't. My day was done. Long bus ride back to here, I'll tell you. So, so you take hits like that, and, so many that you don't remember in life. But anybody that's been in sports, anybody that's been in a car accident, anybody that slipped and fall on an ice, you can start to get these injuries. And sometimes it's the first one that gives you symptoms, like the lady that fell on the ice, like this guy in his 70s that got in this car accident. Or sometimes it develops over time. And you learn to ignore the symptoms because, in sports, I know. I mean, I was a coach. You tough it out, I mean, can he play? Can he play? We need him to play. Can he play? I mean, we understand that, right?
That was our theory then,
Yeah, then and frankly now,
we didn't know.
Yeah, last night I'm coming back from this really amazing seminar out in Morristown, New Jersey, and I'm sitting next to the plane from Minneapolis to Rhinelander, and then the next hop, of course, is to get to here. But from Minneapolis to Rhinelander, I had the pleasure of sitting next to this young lady that works for the FBI out in D.C., and we started talking about concussions. And she says, well, I played soccer. I said, yeah, female soccer players have more risk of concussion than men.
Yeah.
And they feel it's because their necks are skinnier. They don't act as a vibrational dampening device as much for guys. And she starts telling me about her high school quarterback. She says, yeah, the guy was really good, but he got like 4 concussions. And it was interesting. I don't know if she dated him or really knew him that well, but she knew that he had been told not to play anymore, not even to run track, no alcohol, okay? And he's a high schooler, so you shouldn't be drinking alcohol anyways, Nobody does, right? Okay, but in any case, he was told not to, right? So, I mean, basically, stop life as you know it. And she didn't really tell me if he stopped life as but that's what she remembered him from 7 or 8 years. She graduated 8 years ago from high school, so she was 25-ish. And that was just when, this concussion thing was kind of starting to roll with the NFL and all their denials and, BS that they were, pushing. But now it's pretty undeniable what's out there as far as the research. So I'm going to bring all that back as far as the best of the best and help our community out. It's interesting. After I signed up for this seminar, I heard you talking with the Niagara superintendent. And what were they talking about, you and him? Concussions, right?
That's right.
All the protocols and everything that are out there. But really the protocols are, return to play protocols.
Right.
So you've been damaged. Now, how long do we have to sit them out before you can play again? There's very little out on what can you do to get the brain to heal. That's what I'm out there at the Rose Bowl coming up to find out.
Excellent.
That's what I'm there to find out.
Thank you.
It doesn't do us much good to just say, hey, you got a concussion.
Right.
Just sit there till the symptoms are gone if we leave the brain damaged, ripe, and ready to get damaged again.
That's right. Thank you for your time, Doctor.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. John Nowicki, Nowicki Chiropractic and Wellness. On In Touch, for In Touch, I'm Aaron Harper.